Hello and welcome to Race to 2020, your podcast for all things American election. I'm James Morrow. I'm here with Jack Houghton, and we have got some big news for you. She's coming back, baby. That's right. Hillary Clinton.
You called it.
No, well, it's not official yet, but there's another data point here.
They're dipping their toes in the water. They're looking at the data trends. They want to know what would happen if Hillary Clinton was to make a splash in the race.
We have hot off the press here out of the United States. A new poll of registered Democrats has Hillary Clinton as their top choice for the 2020 Democratic nomination, and she's not even running. Now, here's the thing. It's an online Harris survey poll, so it's online, so you can say it's self-selecting. Yeah. But it's Harris, so there's a legitimate people. It's released by the Center for American Political Studies at Harvard University again, so it's not some, fly-by-night online poll. It's not something you put up on Twitter and said, hey, who do you reckon should do this, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, Clinton placed first with 21% of the vote, beating even Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren all the way down at 9, and we'll talk about her later, and Mayor Michael Bloomberg from New York, whose campaign has been about as popular as a case of lice. It just hasn't gone very well for him at 7%. So
it's really a shocking indictment for everybody who's been in the race thus far.
But what have I been saying? This field of candidates, Jack, is so utterly weak that anybody could go. My dog, Maggie, the Iron Terrier, but of course she votes Tory because she's named after Margaret Thatcher, so she wouldn't do it. But she could probably make a pretty good run of it.
Better than Mayo Pete?
Better than Mayor Pete or Mayo Pete or Mustard Pete or whatever we're calling him. I mean, we'll get into that a bit later, but it is just amazing how poorly these Democrats are doing, Jack, and I think this is one of the reasons why they have gone all in on impeachment because they don't see any sort of hope, I think, really at this stage of removing him by electoral means. But we've had bigger news this week with the Inspector General's report. Jack, you want to tell us about it here?
Well, I mean, obviously there's been this report which has dropped into surveillance tactics. Obviously,
who's it from?
It's from the Inspector General.
Correct.
What's his name? Michael
Horowitz. The Department of Justice. Anyway, yeah. So
FBI is surveilling its citizens.
So this is the funny thing. It has been treated in a lot of the media as kind of a vindication for, the FBI, the CIA, the whole sort of deep state thing, and it says that it hasn't proven the deep state coup attempt that Donald Trump has been saying, except for the fact that if you actually start to dive into what the report says, Jack, it actually says some pretty damning stuff. It says that the whole Steele dossier, which was supposed to be the thing, remember the thing that said, Putin has tapes of Donald Trump and prostitutes, doing stuff in hotels in Moscow.
The golden was used.
Yes, this was a particularly. This was supposed to be a sort of golden piece of evidence, and we won't go any further with that because this is a family podcast. But that all of that was a lie in the Steele dossier. Everything in the Steele dossier was from second and third hand sources. So it would have been like an FBI agent talks to me and I would say, oh yeah, well, I heard my mate Jack. He said that his mate heard that so-and-so said that Donald Trump was colluding with the Russians. So it was all this ridiculous sort of rumor stuff, which is bad. But of course, we all knew that dossier, which was paid for essentially by the Clinton campaign. I mean, that's where
handed over to the
so
FBI.
They gave it to the FBI. Then the FBI, now this is an interesting thing, the FBI had apparently a very low bar of, to which it needed to start an investigation, which is fine, but we need to acknowledge the fact that it started the investigation off of this incredibly flimsy evidence. Then here's the more sinister thing. This dossier played a central and essential role, according to the report, in getting these warrants, which are called FISA warrants, which basically are warrants by intelligence agencies to spy on American citizens. So there's special courts that you need to go to get this. So essentially, the intelligence apparatus was weaponized on the basis of very flimsy evidence against American citizens to basically screw over a rival presidential campaign from the Clintons.
They're still doing this. I mean, this is something that Schiff's behaviour has been called into question because part of the impeachment inquiry, he's dug up phone records and conversations that Republicans, not Donald Trump, who is actually at the centre of the impeachment inquiry, but Republicans have been having conversations with third parties.
Well, but not only that,
he's been subpoenaing their records, and the telcos have just handed them over.
They've handed it over. Well, I mean, a lot of that, you got to say, is because, things like the Patriot Act, all post 9/11, allow them to do that. But there's some real sinister stuff,
though. They could contest it.
They could contest it. They could contest it. That's a side issue. But yes, you're right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right about that, Jack. And I'm not in favor of any of that behavior. I'm just saying how it's enabled.
Yeah.
But they also used these and Adam Schiff used these phone records to go and get the phone records of journalists. So he was actually spying on
freedom
journalists.
Of the press, the Democrats love
What
it.
about the First Amendment? If you go back to the 1970s and there was controversy over Richard Nixon doing the same sort of thing. And the press lost its mind because, of course, that was, Richard Nixon. He was a bad guy. But, of course, this is Adam Schiff, and he's trying to get Trump, who's the bad guy now. So it's this dialectic of nonsense that the left runs on, which is that, it's only worthwhile if, it's only immoral if it doesn't hurt our side. But if it's helping our side, there's nothing wrong with it, and there can be no contradictions.
And also something that's really interesting is the chief complaints against Donald Trump is that he's using his power and his influence to manipulate forces against his political rivals.
Yeah.
Then you've got the Democrats and you've got Schiff, who's doing the exact same thing.
Exactly.
And one of these impeachment charges, the obstruction, is it obstruction of justice or is it obstruction of...
Obstruction of Congress.
Obstruction of Congress.
Yeah.
This charge at its core is essentially, well, Donald Trump wants to fight our subpoenas in court.
Yeah.
And they're saying, well, that's obstruction of Congress. Now...
that's not obstruction of justice. That's justice.
That's justice.
That's justice.
That is justice at its core. Yeah. If you can't take a dodgy subpoena to a court to get an independent voice to verify whether you should abide by this subpoena, then what are we all doing here?
And let's have a very recent history lesson too, Jack. This is part of the reason why the likes of Adam Schiff used such dodgy tactics before the impeachment thing, which was to hold these hearings, impeachment hearings, informally, using the Intelligence Committee behind closed doors where they wouldn't have to subpoena anybody because once you start to subpoena people, then people can challenge subpoenas in
and the
court.
Subpoenas are often found to lack the standing they would actually need to get what they're asking.
Which gets us back now to impeachment, which
such as phone records.
Phone records and anything that is material. So we're now down to the impeachment, and and this is really interesting. I mean, there's so many sort of data points on how poorly this is playing. One thing I'll note is that you're starting to see moderate Democrats just starting to say things like, it's more important that, this is out of the
purple Dems.
The purple Dems are trying to see this. I honestly think that Nancy Pelosi, one of the reasons why she's been acting so snappish and nuts about this is because she's got this
she's losing control.
Well, she's got this huge revolutionary vanguard in her party, which has, it's sort of, it's like Bolsheviks and Mensheviks. It's sort of, it's like Jacobins and Girondists. I mean,
which one of the squad?
Yeah, well, the squad are your absolute full-on Bolshevik Jacobins. 100% every day of the week and twice on Sunday, except they don't call it Sunday anymore because it's the 18th Brumaire of Napoleon. But that's enough French Revolution for today.
The really interesting thing is the original line was this is bribery.
Well, hang on. It wasn't bribery. It was
quid pro quo.
There was quid pro quo. There's quid pro quo.
But no, they actually started using the word bribery because they said, well, the American people don't understand what this means.
Because the Democrats actually did focus groups, and they
found,
they
really?
Yes, they did focus groups.
That is hilarious.
They did focus groups, and they found that the word bribery tested better in focus groups than quid pro quo.
Oh, who cares about the truth?
So I mean, that is just the blatant cynicism of the Democrats here. But then they've realized, hang on a second, bribery, that's where you give money to somebody and they do something for you.
There is a federal crime.
And there's a federal crime and there's a statute and all of that.
Very hard to prove.
And so and there's an actual bar and there's a definition
of this
happened?
Word. We had 3 charges.
So now
they've dropped bribery.
Because
what are we left with?
So now they've got obstruction of Congress, which is, as you say, essentially like, well, hang on, I'm going to,
I'm going to check out your claims in court.
Yeah, which and I mean, and like
Obstruction.
And let's take Donald Trump out of the mix here. And for our Australian listeners, there's a different relationship between the executive and the legislature in the United States.
Yeah.
They are meant to balance one another. It's not like here where the legislature is led by the executive in the form of the prime minister. So it's a different relationship, and that was built very much into it. And then you've got the Supreme Court to moderate claims between them. And so it's a different sort of way of doing it. So as you say, obstructing Congress, no. It is just simply the to and fro. So this is
Can I just make one quick point about this? You know what's going to be really interesting when they get Joe Biden and Hunter Biden on the stand, and then the Republicans subpoena them, and then Joe Biden goes, "Well, I'm going to fight the subpoena in court." Is he obstructing things?
Well, exactly. I mean, it's just hilarious.
Because if you're going to say, if you go to a court to check the veracity of my subpoena and whether it legally checks out, if you're going to make the argument that that's obstruction of justice or obstruction of Congress, then you better be very consistent.
Correct.
And you better not contest any subpoenas that the Republicans give you.
Correct.
So I see this being an issue in the future, and I see this being a really strong Republican talking point.
Well, this is the
when they
point
inevitably
too,
reject some of the subpoenas.
The point too is that like the precedent that this is setting is utterly terrible because essentially what they're trying to do, if the Democrats could get this up in as a trial in the Senate, I think the smarter ones among them know that they shouldn't do this. But if they do this, then essentially they're adding in this real sort of Westminster element to the American system, whereby impeachment will just become this kind of regular no confidence vote. And so pretty much, so I can tell you, if this,
that's very interesting.
The further this goes, the more likely it is that pretty much part of the American political process going forward will be that every president will be under some sort of impeachment investigation, essentially from the day that they enter office.
So higher crimes and misdemeanors. I think that's what the
high crimes, misdemeanors.
Sorry, high crimes, misdemeanors.
But and
there's no high crime now. It's just misdemeanors.
Well, but also it's just sort of it's not really well defined. You can go into Federalist. I think Federalist 62 deals with some of this. But don't quote me on that. I'm not sure about the number.
Let's quote him on that.
Federalist 62, fine, whatever. Anyway, but that this is that there's the bar for this is there's not a lot of precedent for it, obviously, because the founders intended that a president would be removed almost never, if not never. And now what will happen is that pretty much everybody will be under impeachment all the time. That's actually really bad for democracy. But the great thing is, and another data point, you can see that even like. I was looking at the Sydney Morning Herald website this morning, and normally, these people are the biggest anti-Trump media around. And you had to scroll down about 3 screens on their website before you got to a little sidebar story about the articles of impeachment being passed. So even they're not talking this. They're not talking this up.
Damaging the Republicans.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think
the
we have
Democrats.
A poll on how this is all.
Well, so this is really. There was another big poll, and this is really interesting because in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, which are key battleground states, they're that sort of industrial Trump heartland. They're part of those states that that Trump campaigned very hard in. He took Michigan, he took Wisconsin because he showed up more than Hillary and he had a better message. They didn't call them deplorables, and he was a better candidate than Hillary Clinton. Anyway, since impeachment has started, so Trump was behind in those states, and now it's flipped. Impeachment has actually been a dog for them. And even Biden, who is supposedly the front runner, is now 3 points behind, which is just like it shows that this impeachment narrative, which they thought was going to be this whole, loaded up, box and dice all tied up with a bow and say, here you go, guys, here's impeachment. American people, we're going to get rid of Trump for you. People are like, no, let's not do that, and they're actually...
It's almost the Democratic base loves the impeachment process. They love that they're doing this. But all the undecided voters in the middle, which is what this election is going to come down to. I know you say this pretty much every week. This is how elections are won on the moderates and the centrists.
Because it's a participation game as much as anything else in the U.S.
Yes.
Because remember,
very different to Australia.
It's not compulsory voting.
Yes.
So it's not compulsory voting. So it's get out the vote. And I'll tell you what, I have talked to so many Americans, and Americans who can't stand Trump. They think Trump is awful, he's immoral, he's a pig, he's disgusting, and everything. And they find the way that the Democrats are acting about him just so appalling and bullying and just smug and nasty.
They're making stuff up as well.
Stuff up.
They've accused him of bribery at the 11th hour. They've dropped the bribery charge from the official impeachment charges.
And the big insult to the American people is here. We are now less than 12 months from the election. Okay, we're going to go into Christmas recess, all that stuff. So we've got less than a year going.
You don't get to decide.
You don't get to decide. We get to decide, and that's a big insult to the voter, because what it's saying to them is that the Democrats are saying, American people, you got it wrong last time, but we'll fix it for you, and there's no risk of you making the same mistake in November.
Who is doing their strategy? Who is behind? Are they just die-hard leftist cultists that they think that this is? Are they crusading, or is there a legitimate political strategy? Because what I see here is, if you look at the polling, it's hurting them far more than it's hurting Donald Trump.
It is.
And their best chance against Donald Trump, I know you disagree with me on this, but it's Biden. And Biden's going to get pulled into this as well.
Well,
no one else stands a chance. The further left you go, away from Biden, the less chance you're going to stand against Trump.
I think that's correct. I mean, but Biden is so sleazy, and his family is so sleazy, and the deeper they go into
Google him touching women on the shoulder.
Yeah, there's a lot of videos on YouTube there with that. But anyway, so the more, and like his son Hunter, oh my God, just to talk about Hunter, who is now being dragged through the family courts in Arkansas, where he got
I'm not across this. Can you tell me this?
So oh my God, all right. So anyway, so Hunter Biden is the son of Joe Biden. He's 49 years old, so he's old enough to know better. He had been in the Navy. He got kicked out of the U.S. Navy for cocaine use because he had some positive drug tests.
Yep.
He wound up, he was married, and then he got divorced because his wife kicked him out because he was using drugs and spending money on strippers and things like that. So that marriage fell over.
Ended up in the courts.
Then his brother tragically died of a brain tumor. But this was the crazy thing. Then Hunter hooks up with his brother's widow, and they get together.
No way.
And while he's together with her, the DNA now shows that he also had a child with this stripper who's now suing him. Now, the interesting thing, this is all very, very,
Is this fake news?
No, this is not fake news. This is all true. It's being played out in the courts right now, and overnight, the mother of his child, the baby mama, has filed a motion in court saying, well, now we need to know, because there's child support and what you owe me, we need to know, we need to see everything that you earned when you were getting money, we think around $50,000 a month, to be on the board of this Ukrainian oil and gas company called Burisma, when your father was vice president of the United States and they had a bunch of business with the White House and trade in Ukraine and all of that. So, this whole impeachment thing winds up becoming, I think, a circular firing squad for the Democrats because, the more they're going to go into this Ukraine stuff, the more they're going to get into Hunter, the more they're going to get into Joe.
And the more they're going to have to reject subpoenas and then charge themselves with obstruction of Congress.
Well, exactly. So, I mean, I just do not think this dog hunts. I don't think that, I think if the Democrats are smart, which, as you say, strategically these people are not, I mean...
You'd think it's this massive political machine. I'm bewildered that this is the strategy they want to take.
Well, but that's the thing, Jack. I mean, this is the thing that's really nuts. Everybody says Donald Trump's an idiot, but if you look at the way this whole thing is played out, like Trump is playing chess and these guys are playing tiddlywinks.
Yeah.
Right? So, I don't know. Anyway.
I'm really interested to watch the journalistic takes on a lot of this. And one thing that I want to draw everyone's attention is the Guardian US editor-in-chief has posted this little tribute, to the impeachment. Now, I've long argued that cases like the impeachment and these very strong leftist talking points, they become an economy. People make money out of them.
Of course.
Journalists make money out of them. It's views, it's traffic.
So, the Washington Post actually did really, really well because they were the first to monetize the kind of outrage.
The subscriptions model with the Times when they start attacking Donald Trump, and they've got whole teams set up to figure out how to monetize it.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, this is the most transparent statement that I've ever seen.
Jack.
So this is from the US editor-in-chief, and this is embedded in the middle of their impeachment coverage. So they're trying to be objective, even though they're essentially lying to their readers how they're covering it. And then they write this: "These are perilous times. Over the last 3 years, much of what The Guardian holds dear has been threatened. Democracy, civility, truth. This U.S. administration is establishing new norms of behavior.
Hang on, stop. Can I stop you there? Can I stop you there? Because they keep talking about norms, but every other week they want to do something like get rid of the Electoral College to prevent Trump from ever winning again.
Yeah.
So it's like, who's shredding norms here, guys? Anyway,
I want to
keep
read
going,
this. This is quite long, but
so
bear with me.
establishing new norms of behavior. Go ahead, please.
And this is from the editor-in-chief of The Guardian. Truth is being chased away. Anger and cruelty disfigure public discourse. And lying is commonplace. Anyway,
Right.
you see how there's no examples here?
No,
it's
no,
just
no,
a
no.
statement. And the way that this is deceptively embedded in their objective impeachment coverage is so trash. This is so trash. Goes on, there's 3 more paragraphs. In the coming year, many vital aspects of American public life are in play. The Supreme Court, abortion rights, climate policy, wealth inequality, big tech, and much more. The stakes could hardly be higher. And the need for a robust, independent press has never been greater. Hey. As 2020 approaches, we're asking our US readers to help us raise $1.5 million by early January to support our journalism.
Right.
They've turned...
We hope you'll consider making a year-end gift. Make a contribution. Get out of here, guys.
They've turned the impeachment inquiry into a way of raising funds to spread their fake news even more.
It's just hilarious.
It's extraordinary.
It's ridiculous. It is just utterly ridiculous.
But look, they're normally a little bit more tame with how they report on this stuff. The SMH is guilty of it. Fairfax is guilty of it.
Yep,
Channel
New York
9
Times,
is
Washington
now guilty
Post.
of it
Yep,
since buying them. The ABC domestically here in Australia. The ABC internationally in the US.
The thing is, too, is that a lot of those outlets, too, just simply pick up the feeds from, the Washington Post and the New York Times, and it's really fascinating to watch how they just pick up those messages, and then that just becomes the line here in Australia.
You'd think that the fact they dropped the bribery charge, which, by the way, this is the essence of the entire impeachment thing. It's that he's held back foreign aid for a favour.
Exactly.
And if that hasn't happened, then nothing has happened.
No,
if
exactly.
you can't prove bribery, you can't get him on challenging the subpoena.
And there is, as has been demonstrated in the hearings, there's actually no material witness to any sort of thing that they're trying to get him.
There was one guy had a conversation with Donald Trump directly, and everything else is hearsay, third parties, and what it comes down to,
feelings.
This is a crime of intent if it was to happen. If they were to go, this is why they can't do bribery, because they need to prove that Donald Trump intended to hold aid to get a specific goal.
Jack?
If his intent was, well, I think Ukraine is dodgy, I don't think they deserve aid, independently from the notion of you should investigate Joe Biden,
there's two
they've
things.
got no case. You can't improve intent here.
There's 2 points to this. Number one, the issue is whether or not the president is allowed to investigate what he thinks, or direct the investigation of something which he thinks may be a crime against the United States. I would say that the interference of Ukraine in American elections, in bribery of Hunter Biden,
cases of bribery.
through a make-work job, a no-show job. It's the oldest trick in the book. You pay off somebody's relative to get them to do what you want. This is the oldest trick in the book. If he's not allowed to say, well, hang on, this is worthwhile being investigated, then, of course, you're just undermining the entire point of the presidency. And, in fact, actually, that really comes down to a lot of what this comes down to. We saw in the impeachment hearings over and over and over again the issue that was raised by these sort of, State Department types and everything was that the president, they would say this with a straight face, the president was subverting U.S. foreign policy. It's like, no, guys, that's not how it works. The American president doesn't subvert foreign policy. He makes foreign policy.
Yeah.
So there's that. But, Jack, and I think this is a point we should wrap up on, the real crime that Donald Trump committed was getting elected. That's what this comes down to. So abusing presidential power, he's been doing that from day one because he's the wrong guy. Yeah. Obstructing Congress, he hasn't let them get their way. Essentially, this is one big tantrum, and it's going to fall apart for the Democrats.
Yeah, and what this displays is the contempt that the left has for anybody that doesn't subscribe to their way of thinking. If you voted against them, you voted for somebody who's treasonous, who is bribing foreign officials. No evidence. We don't need to support these claims. You're morally wrong. I'm morally right. And let's get rid of him. We don't need elections anymore. We just need to pick the most woke candidate.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why they're having all these problems with the nomination, which is where we are today. So I think on that note, let's wrap it up for 2019, and we will see you in 2020 for the next
Have a
Race
Merry
to
Christmas,
2020
everybody.
podcast. Merry Christmas.
Enjoy
Happy
your
New
holidays.
Year. Enjoy the impeachment showdown, and we'll see you in January.